when you're binding a quilt, you want to use a walking foot. A walking foot will evenly feed the quilt and the binding together at the same time. When I'm binding, I use 2 1/4 inch strip that seam together, and I use 2 1/4 inch because it gives the binding a nice plump look whenever I fold it over to stitch it on the other side. I stitch all binding usually by machine because it's quicker. If it's a very, very special quilt that might potentially go into a show, then I'll stitch it by hand. If I'm stitching it by machine, then I attach the binding to the wrong side of the quilt so that when I fold it over to the right side, then I can control where the stitches go. If I was stitching it onto the back side, then I would be stitching all over the edge of the front of the quilt and it would look bad. So I'm just going to stitch this to the corner, and I'll show you how to fold the corner so that it's mitered. You're only going to stitch this on with right there, okay? So I'm stopping my stitches 1/4 inch away from the edge of the quilt. Then I back it up and come back forward to reinforce. Take the whole thing out and clip the threads. Okay, now for the fold. What we're going to do is we're going to fold, here's the stitches along this side, we're going to fold this up like that to make a triangle. You can see that. I'm going to pick it up so that way you can see it better. Okay. We're going to fold it up to form a right angle right here. That's a right angle. So the rest of your binding is up here. Then you're going to fold that down. Just like that. So your finished piece has a fold running all the way through here diagonally and a fold running across the top right there. And I'm going to start stitching again 1/4 inch away from the edge of the quilt, and we're going to stitch down this side. That's how you turn a corner. And you don't need to press this with your iron, just finger press it in place, but make sure that your angle is a really nice sharp 45-degree angle on that first fold, and then that second fold is straight down. And then 1/4 inch away from that edge, start stitching, back up to reinforce it, and then stitch on down. So I've gotten to the end of my binding, and this is where my binding began, and I reinforced it when I started it, and then this is where my binding ended, and I reinforced it when I ended too. And I've left about an 8-inch gap between where it began and where it ended. Now we need to get these two binding pieces together and then finish stitching in this area. So what I did was I lay both pieces of binding over each other, parallel, like that. And I put a pen into the fold of each piece, right on top of each other where they overlap. And this is marking the center of both pieces, so that way they're going to be seamed together at the right place. If I didn't do this, then I would be guessing where the binding should be seamed together and will probably end up either too loose or too tight. So now I'm going to lay this out, and I take my left piece and I lay it down flat, parallel with the top of the quilt. Then I take the other piece and I open it out and I lay it on top, and sometimes you'll have to pull on your quilt a little bit. Lay it on top so that they're perpendicular to each other. That means that they make a plus sign. If you can see that, they make a plus sign like that. And you want to have it so that both needles are directly overlapping one another. There we go. And I take one of the needles out, I hold it firmly with my thumb, I take one of the needles out, take it to the front, and actually pin that very securely. And take the other needle out, we don't need it anymore. And just to test that I've done this correctly, I always pin it diagonally along the line that I'm going to stitch, and if it doesn't fold, yeah, and that's correct. So I folded it and I can test it and I know that that's correct. So now I'm going to stitch it, and you might want to switch from a walking foot to a regular foot just to make sure that your stitches are even and on the diagonal, because you're sewing this on an angle. You might also want to mark this with a black pencil, just to be sure that you've got a very firm line of which to stitch. Do what you feel like you need to do. I don't feel like I need to switch feet because I can stitch fairly accurately with a walking foot, but it is pretty difficult. So I hang onto my thread tails, take out my needles. This is pretty much the only time I ever pin anything with quilting. I don't use pins very much. Just stitch that diagonal down, take it off, cut the threads, and then I always double check it before I cut anything, because if you had this wrong, you want to still have the tails in order to sew it correctly, because it can be a little confusing. So I know I've got this right. I folded it flat, and as you can see, it's flat and flush. There's no, the binding hasn't twisted, and it's pretty much perfect. So now I'm going to open it up and cut off these tails with my scissors. I don't bother with picking up my whole rotary cutter and getting it all the way to a mat. Anything that I can do setting down, I'll do it all setting down. So now I'll just finger press this seam, just finger press that flat, fold it over, finger press it again so it's nice and flush. Then start back about over your previous stitches. So go back over your previous stitches to totally secure this. And so start stitching forward, then stitch back some, and stitch the rest of the binding with a 1/4 of an inch seam. Just